you kidding me?
In 2015, Nintendo fans everywhere were supremely annoyed when Capcom released Resident Evil Revelations 2 for every system under the sun except for Nintendo-produced hardware. It made absolutely no sense to us since the original game was a 3DS exclusive, well, for a time. Here we are a few years later, and Capcom has decided to release Resident Evil Revelations 2 on the PC, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and surprise, surprise, the Nintendo Switch. Having just completed the game for the very first time, and yes, on the Nintendo Switch, I can now say Nintendo fans really weren't missing all that much back in 2015. Ouch. I know, that is a very harsh way to start a review, but the truth is, this really isn't what I was expecting whatsoever. The only thing it really has in common with the first game is that it's a little bit creepy and the episodic nature in which the story is told. Fun fact for you guys that don't know, but originally this game was released over a period of about 4 weeks, 1 episode per week. It was also not created from the ground up for a portable, and oh boy does it show. Playing the Switch version, I was shocked by the amount of loading that's involved from the game's startup. It takes at least 60 seconds to go from the time you boot the game up to the point where you can actually move around in-game. As such, I highly recommend you continue playing this game until it's complete, or to put your Switch into sleep mode whenever you're not playing it, because oh boy, every time you have to load it takes forever. Right off the bat, as the game begins, you can tell this isn't going to be the same experience as the first Revelations. This is a full co-op Resident Evil game, much like Resident Evil 5 and 6. Sadly, the game only supports local co-op, or maybe I would have been much more impressed if there was an online version because I could have played with a friend. Alas, as it is, you play as Claire Redfield and her partner character Moira Burton, daughter of infamous Barry Burton. And speaking of Barry, he's here as well, joined by a child named Natalia. I will say that the episodes are certainly longer than those in the first game, and the storyline feels much more fleshed out. The problem I had almost immediately is that the game just isn't scary. The environments are much more open, and always having a character beside you, helping you in some way, shape, or form, limits the fear factor. And maybe it's just me, but this was a problem I had with Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6. In the original game, there were many times where you were completely alone in Resident Evil Revelations. The game does do a lot of things right. For starters, there are some good scares, even if the overall game isn't as creepy as the original. There are areas where you get a very distinct Resident Evil 4 vibe, whereby a dude with a power drill is chasing you down and enemies just won't stop coming after you. And I love these moments. The problem is that they're few and far between. There are also invisible enemies that your partner character will have to identify for you in order for you to shoot them. And again, these are great moments because they keep you on your toes. They just don't happen that often. The thing is that it's the game structure that ultimately bummed me out. Every chapter or episode begins the same way, with Claire and Moira progressing to a certain point. Long story short, but they were captured by someone who calls themselves the Overseer, and they're trying to get off the secluded island. Barry and Natalia, on the other hand, are basically just trying to figure out what the hell is going on, and Barry's trying to locate his daughter. So what happens is that you play through the environment as Claire and Moira, and then immediately afterwards you traverse the exact same environments as Barry and Natalia. This may have played well when the game was originally released week by week, but playing it in one go like I did means that I'm seeing more or less the exact same stuff 2 times in a row. Okay, that's not being completely transparent, as when you revisit the different areas, you do take alternative paths and new buildings will open up that weren't accessible before, etc. Still, I get what Capcom was trying to do here, but I find it comes across as a bit lazy. You know what I mean? As if they were trying to limit the assets used to make a Resident Evil game almost on a budget. I also couldn't believe that there wasn't a map system in place. Yes, you can locate a map for each region, but the map is limited to simply what you see in the corner of the screen. You never have access to a full map where you can see areas that you may have missed, and that was really disappointing. The best aspect of the whole game has to be Barry's hilarious dialogue, which even quotes some of the lines from the original Resident Evil, whereby he'll say such things as, "Who's the master of unlocking now?" Little lines like that really brought a smile to my face as they play with my nostalgia I have for the series, and I loved that. In terms of gameplay, I found that this Resident Evil plays much more like Resident Evil 0 than any of the other games in the series. The reason why I say Resident Evil 0 is because you can swap characters at any point in the game, and since both characters are working together, they can share their inventory space and they can even issue basic commands like stay or follow. Each character is special in their own right, too. Claire and Barry have your typical Resident Evil playable character access to pretty much everything, whereas Moira and Natalia are different in that each has a very specific ability. Moira holds the flashlight and can see shiny spots in the environment that Claire cannot, but she also has access to a crowbar that allows her to open chests that no one else can. Natalia can kneel and sense enemies in different rooms, sort of like Joel and Ellie do from The Last of Us. Natalia can also see shiny spots and point them out to Barry, or go collect them herself if she wishes. She can also open specific chests and access areas that no one else can because of her tiny size. She's also pretty much the glue that holds the story together. Local co-op is best suited for the big screen TV, as trying to play on the Switch's tiny screen is extremely hard to do given the lack of detail in the graphics. Everything comes across as quite muddy. On top of that, the limited use of the buddy character means that one player is going to have a much better time than another. Much like Resident Evil Revelations, Part 2 here has a fully fleshed out raid mode that allows you to play either locally or online with friends. You can also use Amiibo to unlock additional BP, but unlike the first game, here you can actually unlock skills that are used in the main campaign, making Amiibo even more useful. Skills include more powerful secondary attacks from the use of such items such as a Molotov cocktail, to a larger area for Natalia's scanning ability. And the audio-visual presentation is really impressive. It looks obviously better on the small screen than it does on the big screen, but for the most part, it looks pretty good. In the end, I'm sure some of you will prefer Resident Evil Revelations 2 more so than the original game, but for me, I prefer the first one. I completely understand what Capcom was going for with the repeated environments for story purposes, and in that regard, it works. But I just miss the sheer creepiness offered by the first game.
Follow me.
Yeah, right. place very much. Where do you think we are?